Hello and welcome back to the Villa Filler podcast. I'm here as always with my good friend Dan Wiseman. Dan, we've got quite the episode for our lovely viewers and listeners today, haven't we? Bumper packed. We've got a preview, come transfer rumour mill episode. There's plenty to talk about with Aston Villa. But before we get into that, mate, how are you doing?
Yes, I'm very good, mate. We just joked before we came on air, didn't we, that this is the Villa Filler under the guise of natural daylight. Normally I was speaking to you either before the sun has come up or about 6 hours after it's set. So this is very nice, mate. This is very nice. We're sat here in golden hour, looking our best, doing what we do best. I don't think it will be the last preview come transfer rumour mill that we do this season, mate, somehow. In fact, it wouldn't surprise me if this is a regular occurrence here on out.
It's hotting on up, isn't it, mate? The transfer rumour mill is slowly chugging away. It's pulling out of the station. And, you know, with the season coming to a halt very soon, we don't have many games left. We should be getting prepared for more exciting links. And we're a few days late to this, but, you know, we both kind of said we'll leave this. We'll give you guys a more comprehensive, longer episode because I know that's what you guys enjoy. Hence why we're sort of rolling the two together. Denzel Dumfries. I'm really excited to talk about this one, mate, for a multitude of reasons. The keen-eyed viewers can see behind me, there is an Internazionale scarf behind me. Was lucky enough to go and see him in the flesh with my old man about a month ago now. And, I mean, this is a player, I'm fairly sure I've said this on the podcast, but I know it's certainly something that I've maintained for probably 2 years now. I've really wanted Villa to sign this guy for the longest time, mate. And he had a sort of breakout Euros tournament, didn't he? And he's just I think the biggest compliment you can give him is Inter Milan don't miss Hakimi at all. And they've somehow managed to level up and find a player who may not be as good as him, but sort of excels in similar areas and in other areas defensively as well. And I think that's the biggest compliment you can pay Denzel Dumfries, because I think it's fair to say, mate, Achraf Hakimi is the best right back in the world right now.
Yes, yep. I think you're absolutely right, mate. That is a big testament. The only thing I would say is that with Denzel Dumfries, you're not really signing a right back, you're signing a striker. He doesn't do much of what you expect the right back to do. Like if you think Alex Moreno is an attacking fullback, just you wait until Villa fans. Just you would wait. Denzel Dumfries, as you said, I feel like a lot of people know what this guy is about. The Euros was really interesting though, wasn't it? Because you sort of had, I felt like fullback stole the show. Obviously, Dumfries was charging down that right wing, and then Spinazzola for Italy won the hearts of so many with his performances on the other flank. So it was a Euros where it was kind of dominated by fullbacks in that sense. But no, mate, you're right. Very esteemed Netherlands international, hopped over to Inter from PSV Eindhoven back in 2021. He's made 83 appearances for the Nerazzurri, contributing to 20 goals in the process. So you're basically getting a near enough 1 in 4 return from your right back. That's not too bad. That's what I'm saying about this guy being attacking. He's capable of playing sort of right back and that sort of right midfield role that we've kind of seen Moreno do a little bit of time. So there's a kind of link there. I always provide this absolutely useless information when we talk about any transfer targets. I have no idea if it means anything. It probably doesn't, but I think it's interesting. He shares the same agent as Tyrone Mings.
Oh, so it's Rock Nation.
Yes.
Jay-Z.
He is. Correct, mate. So that might mean something. That might mean absolutely nothing. Either way, it's kind of intriguing. He brings just a barrel of exciting, like he's an absolute monster offensively. Defensively, he's going through a sort of interesting period because Ronald Koeman, who, like, you know, don't worry that you haven't accidentally clicked on a Villa Villa episode from 4 years ago. No, Ronald Koeman is manager of the Netherlands once again. He didn't select Jeremy Frimpong for his last international squad because he was too attacking a right back, but actually selected Denzel Dumfries, which doesn't make a lot of sense. So he's one where he's going through this sort of interesting point in his career, really, where I think he needs to show that he's capable of doing it on that elite stage to his manager on the defensive end, on the international front. And it's interesting that he's come to be linked with a move out of Inter at this time, because, as you say, normally when there's sort of potential unrest on the national scene, players like to really make sure they stay safe. And it's one where he's long been considered one of the most talented wing-backs in Europe. But despite all of those stats, his time at Inter hasn't really gone as he hoped. The Inter fan base, they're not completely won over by him, it seems. Obviously, we're really trying to do this from the outside looking in. And it's one where it's a kind of surprise, but do you think that's related to perhaps his efforts on the defensive end, mate?
I'd say so. I think to be fair, since I've been to see Inter, they've been pretty tragic. They've sort of struggled to win a few games. They've slipped from the heights of second all the way down. Personally, I'm not very convinced by Simeone Inzaghi as a manager. Obviously, kind of came in and picked up the pieces that Antonio Conte had left when he obviously walked away from that a while ago. And listen, they've had domestic success in cup competitions since Conte's departure, but it just, I don't know, there's just something that's not right about Simone Inzaghi at Inter. But I think, as all things that we've sort of come to realise, mate, since November now, a good coach can resolve any of these problems, absolutely any of them. And the only player I would say who has not necessarily kicked on under Unai is Leon Bailey, but that's a conversation for a completely different day. I can see notable improvements in every single one of these players that has played for us. We even speaking about Leander Dendoncker, in the last podcast, mate, how brilliant he'd been. And if we're being completely frank, he's a limited player. But with Dumfries, there is so much attacking potential, mate. As you say, it's maybe the sort of defensive aspects that are, sort of left to be desired. He's within the top 1 percentile for non-penalty XG, and also touches in the attacking penalty area. He's averaging 4.44 touches in the attacking penalty area per 90. So that's going to tell you everything you need to know about this man. He's an absolute workhorse. He's averaging 1.64 shots per 90, which naturally puts him within the top 1 percentile of all fullbacks over the past year. He's just, his progressive passes received 8.15 per 90. He's, as you said, he's basically a striker. It's interesting, mate. And I think what Denzel would give us is options, because at the moment, it feels like forever, really. Villa's sort of main attacking output has always been down that left-hand side, whether that is Alex Moreno or Jack Grealish or whoever it has been previously. With, potentially Europe on the horizon and the need for a bigger squad and players with experience on the continent and who are sort of held at a higher regard to what we have at the club at the moment, mate. Maybe this is how you get more out of Luca Dean as well, right? Maybe, for some games you play with Luca as a more defensive left back, and you allow Denzel to go up the pitch. It's about options, really. And, what we're saying about sort of defensively, that's not to say he's bad defensively. I think more so the system that he's playing in the back three that Inter and Inzaghi have been deploying has left him so far up the pitch that, he'd have to be an absolute, he'd have to be as fast as Usain Bolt to get on the recovery sometimes in the positions that he finds himself in the box.
Yeah, no, for sure, mate. It's one where he'd give a lot of fun. And, I kind of, there's a really good piece on The Athletic for any of the listeners who are subscribed that Greg Evans did following the Newcastle game. It just sort of goes into Unai Emery's reign in a little bit more detail and speaks about the sort of individual roles and the wider setup as a team and how it changes game by game. So he talks about against Crystal Palace, where he gave Matty Cash real license to get forward and he wanted him to get down that right wing. And he obviously ends up getting the assist for the winning goal. However, against Bournemouth, Matty Cash, or Greg Evans says, was instructed to really stay back defensively and be wary of any counter-attacking threat. And obviously, that game went to plan as well. And so it's one where that's the only thing that kind of, and what I alluded to at the start, in that obviously I know that Unai can coach these things, and Denzel Dumfries is a right back. He'll have the ability to defend. But I think it does interest me a little bit, given that we expect our players to be able to do this, to be an out and out defensive right back one week, and your more, winged back role the next. Whether someone like Dumfries is the right kind of profile for that. You see what I'm trying to say? If you got a right back that's so eggs in one basket offensively, you run through all of those stats, mate. I think it's interesting we've not gone for. I think Alex Moreno is just on the right end of the scale, whereby he's not the greatest defensive left back in the world, but he can still do that to a really good standard, and he's got the offensive ability to go with it. Feels like Denzel Dumfries is all in or nothing on that offensive end.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I mean, listen, you're gonna it's still with some buts, but with Europe, you are gonna need a squad, mate, and
yeah,
Wan-Bissaka's another one. He's been linked. I would really love us to sign Wan-Bissaka. I think he needs a move to Aston Villa, and that's why it would work out. He needs to come to a club like us, where there's sort of less scrutiny, and he can sort of work on his game and that sort of time out of the spotlight is something I think he would really benefit from, coming to a club like Villa, from Manchester United. But again, he's a completely different profile to Denzel. He is your shut up shop right back, and I think there's a bit of a myth that he can't really attack. Like, he did get quite a few assists in that sort of breakout year. He's putting many across in the box, but it seems like as soon as he stepped north of the Watford gap, he just couldn't manage across to sort of save his life, which is a bit, I don't know, you can't really understand that. But again, all this kind of stuff comes down to coaching, mate, doesn't it? So
yes,
it's, he can, I sound like a broken record. He can sign whoever, mate, and as long as it's not someone like Troy Deeney, like, he's got my backing. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's
totally,
he can make something out of nothing. So, but you're right. Yeah. There are certainly question marks that sort of come over this. And would this indicate a change in style as well? Would we be looking to maybe deploy a back five at times as well? With Moreno and Dumfries. I don't think that's something that it would be too far out of the question when you go and sign another really sort of offensive fullback. But yeah, guys, let us know what you think on Denzel in the comment section down below. If we've got any sort of Italian-based or Dutch-based listeners who happen to know a bit more about Denzel, let us know in the comments. But another exciting name, mate, that's popped up yet again this is really exciting, mate. Nico Williams. The fact that wait, is it Nico Williams? Have I just got that wrong?
No, yeah, no, you got it right. We should preface Nico Williams. We're talking. Yeah, I was going to say we should preface. We're not talking about the dodgy right back that played for Forest. We're talking about the Spanish starlet.
I had to second guess myself there. Yeah, Nico Williams, mate. This is somebody who we sort of spoke about briefly a few months ago. There seemingly serious interest, and we pushed hard to try and sign him for, I think it was 45 million euros, which is his release clause. Obviously the brother of Iñaki Williams. How often is it that you get sort of football siblings that get to play with each other? That's a nice and wholesome story. And there's this amazing sort of Iñaki Williams like lore that sort of surrounds him and his culture and heritage, and the fact that he went over 6.5 years, I believe, without getting injured, and he sort of put it down to eating his mom's homemade African food, eating plenty of jollof and things like that, which sort of prevented him from getting injured. And he holds the most consecutive La Liga appearances in that time as well. So if that's anything to go by, mate, you'd hope that his brother it has that same kind of spirit and grit that's just sort of ingrained in the Williams DNA.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a really interesting, if you are going to get one club in the world where you're more likely to get two brothers playing for the same outfit than anywhere else, it's probably an athletic club. I just find it felt like they've had Inaki for so long, and then, given that we can't really sign anyone from anywhere else, don't suppose you've got like a really good brother, do you? And he's like, well, actually, yeah, I do. Introducing Nico Williams, born 2002. God, that's depressing, isn't it, mate? Well, what is going on in the world? We are, man. I think I had to give up my chances of playing for the Villa at this point. Yes, out and out star at the age of just 20. Made his debut for Bilbao in 2021. He'd been playing for their Segunda team. He's had spells at Osasuna and Pamplona, but he's come to settle at Athletic Club, and he has just exploded. He came into the first team in his debut in the Copa del Rey, scored 2 goals, and ever since then it's just an upward trajectory like you wouldn't believe. Played obviously several games for Spain as well now. He's up to 8 caps, which is pretty crazy. He's got off the mark for them as well. And at just 20, he's coming to a really interesting point in his career. And I'm surprised. Look, I'm not surprised that he's being linked to other clubs, but if there's any substance to this, and it seems like we are really keen on him, it does surprise me a little bit, because players from the Basque Country who get to play for Athletic Club, particularly, not so much Real Sociedad, but have a real affinity for that club. And even if they do leave, more likely than not, they always seem to end up coming back to that region, a la Ander Herrera or somebody like that. It's one where I look at his brother is a perfect example, whereby, he's been perennially excellent in Iñaki Williams year on year and year, and has chosen to stick and play for Athletic Club for the longest time. I mean, how many offers? He's still only 28, but how many offers do you think have been put across the table for Iñaki Williams over the years? And still he remains on course to hit, over 400 appearances for the club he's played for all of his life. I mean, he's changed international allegiance before he's changed club, for God's sake. Represents Ghana over Spain. And so undoubtedly there's this older brother in his ear who will be sort of telling him to stick around. And look, I don't think Nico Williams will follow suit and play for Bilbao forever, but there is a kind of part of me that thinks at just 20 years old, this kid is still fresh on the scene, despite what it may seem. Does sort of bear the question is, even another 2 or 3 years in Spain, the amount that he would develop, he could become the face of that club, still only be 23 years old, and then seek a move then. It's not a surprise that we're being linked to him, but it's very early on in his career, which is very exciting for the Villa. But I'm thinking at that club in particular, it will be very interesting to see if he chooses to leave this summer.
It is, mate. It's almost like it means so much, doesn't it? That football in the Basque region, it's remarkable. But listen, he's had a fantastic season, right? 5 goals, 5 assists in 28 appearances in La Liga. You can't go wrong there. Can play either side. And, he's putting up numbers that are comparable to another player who's been linked and we've spoke about before, mate, Samuel Chukwueze. So, it's going to be interesting because, like, again, where would Williams fit in this system? Is it the sort of Buendia Bailey role as the sort of shadow striker? Are they going to play further behind? We've actually seen Williams play as a wing back at times as well. He's not done it very often, but he's sort of capable of doing that. I don't think he'd ever do that for Villa. I don't think that's how we'd deploy him. But it's interesting, mate. He's averaging 5.48 progressive carries per 90. He's averaging 2.41 successful take-ons per 90. And he's really sort of leads that press from the front, averaging 1.44 blocks per 90 as well. So, I mean, 45 million euros, whatever's being dubbed, it seems like a lot of money for people who may not have heard of Nico or be too familiar with the Spanish game. But as our in-house La Liga expert, Dan, I think it's fair to say this is money well spent, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this kid's upside is just colossal. The, both domestically and internationally, there's so much faith being put in Nico Williams by a variety of different managers. I think, he's someone who the family and his brother around him have got, he seems to have a real level-headed head on his shoulders. And obviously our manager is Basque,
Yeah.
so it's like there's a face from the same region, which is no doubt proving super interesting in terms of these negotiations and will undoubtedly be a big factor. It was undoubtedly for Alex Moreno too. So yes, we're not going to be the only ones sniffing around in this summer. It would a deal that would obliterate our existing transfer record. But as I said a few podcasts ago, mate, I think that's going to happen anyway this summer.
Yeah, I think we're going to probably break that one or two times, depending on the order of business that gets done. But it's really exciting, mate, to even be discussing links with the caliber of players that we're talking about here. Obviously, both sort of at two different ends of their careers, but both capable of much more amazing things. But now to come back down to earth, mate, we've got Aston Villa versus Brentford. Brentford versus Aston Villa at the Brentford Community Stadium. This, I'm going to say it again, guys, this is the one where we can really sort of take ourselves seriously, right? If we get a win and a good performance in here. It's not been a very happy hunting ground. Brentford just are one of them bogey teams. Obviously, we did them, was it 4-0 in the Austin McPhee revolution? Not Austin, was it Austin McPhee? Yeah, it was Austin McPhee and I've forgotten his name now. Shows how much of a fucking lasting thought he's left on me. The coach, Aaron Danks, that's the one. Aaron Danks masterclass. With Austin McPhee, he was there, I can confirm. But here we are, mate. We're at a completely different point in the season now. We come into this unbeaten in our last 8, 5 wins on the bounce. And Brentford aren't having the best of times themselves, mate. Looking at it, they're winless in their last 5. They've scored like what? I think they've scored 4 goals in their 5 goals in their last 5. But the results there, they've had a 3-3 to Brighton, which felt like a really big sort of game at the time. They've lost to United, they've lost to Newcastle, they've lost to Wolves. So they're not in the best of form right now. And all things here, mate, with Villa's form away from home and how Unai has sort of bucked the trend of the London curse and all this kind of stuff, everything points towards a potential Villa win here.
Yes, it does, mate. It's interesting you mentioned that Brentford, struggled for goals in recent games, because it only really hit me the other day that we've conceded just 1 goal from open play in the last 8 games. Wow, quite remarkable. The defense has just been amazing. That same article I was referencing earlier by Greg Evans in The Athletic references the work that Unai has been doing on a personal level with each individual player. He talks about that trip to Dubai in December was really important in terms of Emery working one-on-one with both Mings and Konsa, showing them how to position their bodies when receiving the ball and being able to play out and opt out for those sequences that he's looking to achieve when we're passing through the thirds. And it's fair to say that since the turn of the new year, apart from those games against Arsenal and Man City, which, I think we can excuse, we've been pretty watertight. The only one that bucks the trend is that freak result against Leicester. So, when you look at the last 8 games, as I said, we've kept clean sheets against Newcastle, Forest, Leicester, and that's Harvey Barnes' goal is that 1 goal that we've conceded from open play. Clean sheets against Chelsea, Bournemouth, West Ham was a penalty, Palace, Everton, and then there's those 2 games against City and Arsenal. So defensively, we've just been so sound. And I don't think with all of the Ollie Watkins hype and how well we've been seeing the likes of JJ and Douglas Luiz play, there's perhaps been enough praise put on what we're achieving from the back. I think Emi Martinez's distribution has come on in leaps and bounds, and he's now able to vary that game by game. I thought we went quite direct against Newcastle. I thought Emery really got that right. I thought Martinez was sound coming out from the back, and he's, every game there's at least one worldy save that's backing that up.
Yeah,
Big Mings and Konsa have been great. I spoke earlier on about what Matty Cash has been able to achieve in that time. More recently, Ashley Young has been fantastic. Alex Moreno is looking better than ever before. I just think that defensive unit is performing so well. And it's meaning that all we need up front is one goal from Ollie Watkins, who's seemingly doing that every game. And we're just pulling away. And, it sounds stupid, but winning by 1 or 2 goal margins has been the story in this run. 1-0 against Palace. We put 3 past Bournemouth, but they didn't come until quite late on in the game. 2-1 against Leicester, 2-0 against Forest, and then obviously we blew Newcastle away. But for the most part, the wins under Emery have been by small margins, and it's because we've been so good defensively, which looks like it could be the key here, mate.
absolutely, mate, absolutely. And we know the threats that Ivan Toney possesses, but as you rightfully point out, mate, the defense has been just as good, if not better, and that's what's really important because there's been a few instances where I think better teams maybe put us to the sword a bit in a couple of occasions, especially even in the Newcastle game. There was opportunities that they had, like the Isak one, where the defence just sort of gifted him this lovely little shot on goal, which Emi made a wonderful save from as well, by the way. But it's one of them ones where I think Arsenal probably, and Arsenal and City are sort of case in point of. They were teams that we probably conceded too many big chances to, and they've punished us for that. So, without meaning to trigger any Villa fans, maybe we've ridden our luck in some instances, and we all know what Tony loves a goal against Villa, mate. He absolutely does. But we always look good for a goal, don't we? We always look good for a goal. We've scored in the last 8 games we've played on the road, which is pretty mad when you consider pre-Uno, we couldn't look like we could even buy a win on the road. Obviously, that's not wins, but if you score away from home, chance of winning is obviously going to be way higher. 4 clean sheets in the past 5, as you said, mate, only conceding 1 in that time, which is pretty mad. It's just, and I mean, we've scored in our last 18 games. We mentioned it in the last preview, mate. There's only 2 managers before who've achieved that feat, and it was Carlo Ancelotti. I believe it was Mike Smith or someone like that who managed Norwich in '92. So that is pretty outrageous to be up there with Carlo Ancelotti in some facts and statistics there, mate. But I think I feel really confident, and I think we kind of, a lot sort of gets puts onto this, like when Tony scored and did the Zulu to the whole end, naturally we're going to hate him, and obviously I hate him for doing that as well. But I kind of feel like when we sort of perpetuate this sort of super villain narrative with a lot of these players, and more often than not, Tyrone Mings is able to be the one to defeat that. Maybe call them super villains rather than superheroes. And Tyrone is our superhero in that instance, with Wilson as well. All that stuff from Wilson pre-game, where he was like, Villa are on fire, but the firefighters are coming into town. Cuts Tyrone, throwing him on the floor at 94 minutes. Do you know what I mean? So I just think we're so solid right now. And I mean, it would be typical for Brentford to sort of manage to get their own back and on the 4-0, which they're going to look to be doing, and fire themselves more firmly into the European conversation, because in recent weeks, mate, we've definitely pipped them to that. Everybody's talking about if it's going to be us or Brighton, and the conversation has kind of veered. It's been a hard right, really, away from Brentford.
Yeah.
So they're really going to want to sort of stake their claim and be like, now we're still in the hunt for European football of some description.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right, mate. They're on a low-key, a bit of a slump.
Yeah.
They haven't won a game in over a month. You have to go back to the 15th of March for the last time they won a game, and that was against Southampton, which feels like it should come with a caveat of some kind. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Before, they're coming off to back losses against Wolves, Newcastle, and Man United. They then had a pretty crazy draw with Brighton in a 3-3 draw with Leicester, and that win against Southampton. They lost to Everton. They beat Fulham, who themselves are in a bit of a bad place. And then you're sort of going back to February. So it's not been great. And their running looks pretty tough. They've got ourselves, they've got Chelsea, Liverpool, West Ham, Spurs, City, Brighton, and then that rounds out their season. So there's a lot of tough games still for them to play. So, you look at, they've got Nottingham Forest at home in there as well. And then maybe that West Ham game at home. I mean, they're the only games really where you're looking at a definite chance of 3 points. And to be fair, you probably have to look at a trip to Stamford Bridge in the same like 2 now in their defence. So it's interesting how this game sort of represents a nice full circle moment for the Villa, really, mate. Obviously, you mentioned that 4-0. That was the first game after Gerrard got sacked. That amazing game with Aaron Dance in charge where we just exploded out the traps. I think it was like 3-0 by 15 minutes. That game and fever that was around it was actually ended a pretty bad run we got against Brentford. Ended an 8-game winless stretch that we had against the Bees. We lasted the league double over them in 1946-47 though. So there's another record for you and I.
Wow. That's mad, isn't it? That is absolutely crazy. And we've only, so of the 8 away games, we've drawn 1, lost 1, won the remaining 6, which is pretty mad under Unai. And I want to talk about JJ, man, because how good has he been? He's been absolutely brilliant. Saw him sort of mucking about with Emmy on Emmy's Instagram story earlier. Looks like that just the mood in general is brilliant. But Jacob Ramsey himself has been involved in 5 goals in his last 5 Premier League games for Villa. That is 2 goals and 3 assists, which is as many as he's managed in his previous 37 games. So that's almost a whole season, which was 3 goals and 2 assists. So it's sort of flipped the other way around. He has been so important to this team recently, and he's really taking on the information that Unai's given him. And I've had that Ramsey goal played in my head on repeat, mate, because not that cushion down from Ollie is so good. And obviously there's a push there as well. So for him to have even found JJ in that situation, absolutely brilliant. Obviously could have got himself a second in that Newcastle game as well. But I think the role he plays and where he sort of pops up and manages to sort of find space, it goes really unnoticed because of the hard work that Watkins and Buendia do when sort of working the back 4, really. So they create him all this space, and it's nice to know that he's sort of stepping up to that and he's delivering with the goals, mate. Because we spoke about him under Gerrard and how that felt like a coming of age thing, right? Because he was scoring a few and he, it was like he was learning from Steven Gerrard. But now to be putting up the similar goal assist output in just his last 5 games, that's absolutely crazy.
Yeah, no, it is, mate. He's just it feels disrespectful, doesn't it, to come on this podcast and single out particular players. There's just the upturn form with so many of these boys, as you rightly touched on. It's just immense. It goes on and on and on, and he's just yet another success story, mate. They're all in there, and it's going to be a crazy run into the end of the season. And you can't say that we're going to win all of them. We'll slip up eventually. We're not going to go even undefeated until the end of the season. But you just have to be so confident. And these gaps between Saturdays are far too long, mate. I need them to come around quicker than this.
Well, mate, if we're not going to win all of our games, I'm going to need a prediction on this one, man. What are you thinking?
Yeah. I'll go 2-1, please.
You know what?
Villa, that is.
I would absolutely take that, mate. I would take that in a heartbeat. But there's just something about this one. I'm feeling more reserved. I'm gonna go 1-1. That's my head talking, not my heart for once, leading me down a path, expecting a Villa win. But hopefully, I mean, if Villa can get a win, then wow. As I say, build the statue, mate. It needs to happen. But guys, I hope you enjoyed this bumper packed Villa Filler episode. Wherever you're watching, make sure you engage, whether that be leave a review, follow us on Apple and Spotify, subscribe if you're on YouTube. We'll be doing a shirt giveaway very soon. If you didn't know, we're on TikTok and Instagram. On TikTok, it's at Heart of the Holte, and on Instagram, it's at Villa Philip Pod. I almost forgot the name then. All the links that you need to know are going to be in the description down below, as well as the link to our FPL mini league. So yeah, make sure you like, subscribe, share, all that kind of stuff. Up the Villa.